Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Yo.
It is Season 4, Episode 45 of the podcast. We're talking Steelers and Bengals for tomorrow's game, which is going to be Week 12, the final week of bye weeks. And we're getting close to the stretch. This could be the beginning of the stretch run, if you will. The good teams have really separated themselves, and the bad teams, like the Bengals, have really separated themselves as well. And there's that collection of, average teams. Will they, won't they get in? And the Steelers are among that group there. So there's still a lot left to be determined. But that being the case, the Steelers get the worst team in the league, at least record-wise, at about the right time with a bunch of offensive pieces missing. And just early thoughts, how are you feeling about this game, Austin?
I feel like it's going to be an upset. I feel like the Bengals are going to get their first. It's possible the Bengals get their first win here. I'm hoping not, but I'm not feeling good because of all the offense that's out, which is you're losing your number one wide receiver and you're losing your number one running back, and you're getting back your running back 3 for this game, or your best runner behind Connor. But other than that, I just don't feel good. I feel like this game is going to be unnecessarily close.
Well, happy Saturday to you too, my friend.
What do you think of this game?
I certainly haven't been thinking that quite doom and gloom, but all things considered, I can understand where you're coming from, and a lot of that stems from, as you mentioned, the injuries that the Steelers suffered, and let's get into that first and foremost. The two big names that we have been paying attention to and are going to continue to pay attention to are wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster and running back James Conner. So James Conner, as we suspected, did not practice at all this week. He was declared out relatively early in the week, and he's still recovering from that shoulder injury that he re-aggravated. I think it was the Dolphins game. Yeah, he originally injured it against the Dolphins, and he re-aggravated it last week, so he is out. Juju Smith-Schuster, he suffered that concussion. He also has a knee injury from last week's game. He's also been declared out, so the Steelers are going to be without their top wide receiver and running back for this week's game, and you already talked about Benny Snell. He's going to be back. And just a list of guys that will be playing. It looks like it's going to be Deontay Johnson at receiver, running back Benny Snell, reserve linebacker Ola Adeni, both the tight ends Nick Vannett and Vance McDonald, and outside linebacker Bud Dupree is also set to play despite various ailments. So it's going to be no James Conner again. Like you said, it looks like it's going to be mostly Benny Snell and Jalen Samuels, possibly with a little bit of Trey Edmonds sprinkled in here and there. So Benny Snell to the rescue. This could not have been a better time for Snell to make his return.
Yeah, he's probably a better runner than Jalen Samuels would be, so he's probably going to be the primary rusher in this game. It seems Randy Fichtner was actually kind of a little bit like he was mysterious about what he was actually doing. He kind of made it sound like Jalen Samuels would get the lump sum of carries, but I think that it's going to end up with Benny Snell having more carries in this game. But yeah, it's good for Snell to be back for here.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Samuels this year, because there were expectations that he was going to be utilized in a way similar to maybe how James White is used in New England, a pass-catching running back that's a situationally sound guy that can be a change-of-pace runner. And we really haven't seen that this year. Samuels has been okay as a receiver. He still seems to have issues with drops. He hasn't been a good pass protector, and I just feel like he hasn't been a very good running back in terms of the pure running. His vision doesn't seem to be good. There just doesn't seem to be a big burst. I don't know what to make of it other than maybe expectations were a little too high for him, because it seems like he's struggling in several aspects of what it means to be a running back.
Yeah, the only thing he's got really is his receiving, and it's only been okay. He's not really broken off a big run. I mean, his probably best one was the touchdown last game, which was the only touchdown in the game, and that's probably like maybe his best play all year just because it's a touchdown. But I don't know. Just as a runner, he hasn't been that good. It's just not been working. Besides, in the last Bengals game, that was like the only time where his rushing was efficient, and it wasn't even really rushing. They were doing touch passes. I still consider it rushing, even though technically it's not, but whatever. Regardless, that was like the only time that I saw him have good ball carry vision and stuff, and it had to come against the worst rushing defense in the league. So I don't know. I don't really trust in his rushing abilities, and like you said, his pass blocking is questionable. All he's got is his receiving.
Yeah, and I just it's frustrating because I think expectations were pretty high for him after a really solid showing against the Patriots last year, but I keep circling back to the fact that he basically was not a running back when he was at North Carolina State. He was just a Swiss Army knife, and he does a lot of things, but he doesn't do a lot of things well. So hopefully going into next year, the Steelers can try to maybe fine-tune his game so that he's only worrying about a couple things and not a ton of things, because right now it's just not working out. So again, hopefully we're going to see more Benny Snell in this one. I'm excited to see what he can do coming back from that knee injury and what was originally probably viewed as a luxury pick. I know that you saw it that way, Austin, and there were certainly other positions that seemed to be more important. With all the injuries at stake here, Benny Snell seems to be, it seems to have been the right move to make, at least in terms of the results that we've seen this year, just because of all the injuries. So hopefully we'll see a good impact from Snell, at least a hard and physical runner who has more experience in actual running situations. And on the other side here, we have Juju Smith-Schuster. What's been a pretty disappointing year for him. He is going to be out for this one, which means it's going to be a lot of James Washington, Deontay Johnson on the outside, probably some more Johnny Holton and Tevin Jones, and of course the newcomer Deion Kane as well, who said he was taking first-team reps with the offense. So, why don't we touch a little bit about Deion Kane? We don't know a ton about him, but the fact that he's been practicing first team seems to suggest that he's going to have at least some sort of significant role on the offense this week.
Yeah, man. From what I heard, he's another Johnny Holton-esque type where he has a dropping problem, but he could run really fast. It's kind of like Sammy Coach, Johnny Holton, Justin Hunter, that type. So my hopes are not high for him, but apparently the Steelers have been in on him for a while. I think he could. Can he get much worse than Holton? Let's be real here. Honestly, any wide receiver is an upgrade over Holton, even if they do the same thing. If this guy makes one catch in this game, he's already better than Johnny Holton. I know Johnny Holton got like an 18-yard catch last game, but it doesn't matter to me. When you get one catch or 18 yards on your something like 13 targets, it doesn't matter to me. You're not good. You're not good enough. So if Deion Kane could even get a catch in this, he was worth bringing in, even if you have to keep him for 3 weeks. Honestly, that's really all I have to say about him. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, not a ton. I think you're right in that regard. I think that he's probably going to eat into some of Johnny Holton's snaps because, at this point, I don't really see how you can justify continuing to roll out Johnny Holton with what he's given you so far this year.
It doesn't make any sense.
So I think we'll see. I think we'll see a lot of the young guys and Deontay Johnson and James Washington. I think we'll see occasional plays from to Deion Kane. At the very least, it's something different, and we can get into that a little more later. But I would expect to see a little bit of something there. But the wide receiver core is obviously hurting right now. And then the only other player who's going to most likely miss the game is cornerback Artie Burns, recovering from that knee injury. He was a full go in practice on Friday, but he was listed as doubtful, which makes me wonder if he re-aggravated something on Friday and something happened on Saturday. Maybe it got more swollen, and the team figured, he's probably not going to be able to go. So I have a feeling that Artie Burns is not going to be able to play in this one, which means it's going to be, I guess Justin Lane becomes the next backup on the outside. But if I had to venture to guess, if something happened to Hayden or Nelson, that they would end up sliding Cam Sutton to the outside in a pinch.
And I think that would be the best move. Cameron Sutton has played outside a little bit, not much this year, but in the past. So I would feel more comfortable putting Cameron Sutton out there, especially with how well he's played so far this year, even if it's come from the slot. So, yeah.
On the other side of the ball, the Bengals are dealing with a few injuries of their own. Tight end Drew Sample, their reserve, one of the guys that you looked at pre-draft this year, Austin, he's out with an ankle injury. And wide receiver A.J. Green is still out with an ankle injury. Do you think he's going to play at all this year?
You just need to put him on injured reserve and just call it a day. He's not playing. There's no way. Why would he even come back and play? He's on a contract year. There's honestly, what does he have to prove? You know what you're going to get with him. He's going to get a nice contract on the open market, or the Bengals are going to pay him. He's got nothing to prove, and there's no reason for him to hurt himself worse coming and playing this year.
The Bengals aren't going to put him on IR because then they have to sign someone else and pay that player money.
So they'll keep A.J. Green where he's at. You're right.
That seems like a very Mike Brown move. But in any case, there are two other receivers on the injury report. That includes Auden Tate with a concussion. He's questionable, and wide receiver Stanley Morgan, who's also questionable. But because they didn't really make any roster moves, it seems like both those guys are going to be good to go. That's kind of what the general consensus is. So Tate and Morgan look like they're good to go, and the Bengals have three guys that look like they're going to be able to go, or actually four. You've got guard Alex Redmond with an ankle and knee injury that seems like he's good to go. Center Billy Price should be back, and safety Sean Williams is going to be returning with that thumb injury. And not to mention, left tackle Cordy Glenn is set to make his debut this season against Bud Dupree on the left side there. And you remember Dupree had that critical strip sack in the first Bengals matchup back in Week 4. So keep your eye on that. So again, both teams dealing with injuries at this point. But from the Bengals side, it's a lot of offensive injuries, just like the Steelers have been dealing with as well. So the Steelers at 5-5 and the Bengals at 0-10. The Bengals became the first team to be officially eliminated from playoff contention this season last week, and things haven't been looking good for them. And when it comes to this series between the Steelers and Bengals, it's been decidedly Pittsburgh's advantage. The Steelers hold a 65-35 all-time record against the Bengals. The most recent result obviously being that 27-3 victory for the Steelers on Monday Night Football in Week 4, which was Mason Rudolph's first start at home. And the Steelers have won 9 straight games against the Bengals, going all the way back to the early-ish middle portion of the 2015 season, where Ben Roethlisberger rushed back from a knee injury. It was that MCL sprain, and the Steelers lost 16-10. But since then, the Steelers have not lost to the Bengals. And just a fun fact, it's no secret, the Bengals have struggled against the Steelers for a long time. We know this. In the past decade, so up to the calendar date, which is 11/23/2019, so it's November 23rd of 2019, so going back to November 23rd of 2009, the Bengals have only beaten the Steelers 3 times. A big reason for this is the fact that the Bengals have not scored more than 21 points in a game against the Steelers since Week 3 of the 2009 season, when the Bengals had 23 points, and mind you, one of those touchdowns that they scored in that game came off of a pick 6. The last time the Bengals scored more than 23 points against the Steelers, you have to go all the way back to their first matchup in the 2006 season. So that's going back a long, long time, 13 years in the opposite direction here. So, the Bengals offense has had some significant struggles against the Steelers defense for over 10 years now. And if you look at the statistics for this team, the Bengals are horrible, but there's not much reason to think that that's going to change this week with the offense. So let's get into this game now, Austin. I kind of just started here with us talking about the Bengals offense and the Steelers defense. With the Bengals offense, we talked about it. They're missing their top wide receiver in A.J. Green. That offensive line is getting, they're getting a key piece in Cordy Glenn back, but they're still a largely horrible unit, and they're missing A.J. Green. They have an injury at tight end. The offense has not played well this year, and they went to Ryan Finley 2 weeks ago over Andy Dalton, and they're trying to figure out who Ryan Finley is. He's not been good this year. He's completing, I think, less than 50% of his passes, and although he's a mobile guy back there, he has really struggled. This has been a bad, bad offense.
Yeah, man, and it's not going to look like it's going to get better against one of the top defenses here. It's just going to be rough for them I mean, having Cordy Glenn back is great, but it's not the right side that you need it for. Like, Bud Dupree's been playing a great year. He's had a career year. But you still have T.J. Watt on the other side going against Bobby Hart, and that's never going to – that never, ever is that going to work. It doesn't matter what running back you put to help him, what tight end you use to help him. If you move over another lineman, it doesn't matter. If you have to take two linemen to block T.J. Watt, someone's just going to come down the middle, and it's just going to mess up the Bengals' day. It's going to mess up the poor rookie quarterback's day. He's already, like you said, not been performing well, so they don't have enough. Tyler Boyd is not enough. Joe Mixon is not enough, and Joe Mixon's had a bad year too. I do think that despite his offensive line being bad as well, I think Mixon has not been good either. He's definitely could have done more early on, but I mean, it's just a combination of everything being bad. And I mean, I actually like their tight ends. I like Eifert. I like Drew Sample. He's out for this game, and then I'm forgetting
Uzama, C.J. Uzama.
Yeah, CJ. I knew the CJ. I forgot his last name, but yeah, I like him too. But like that's really it. Like their offense is just not, as a whole, coherent. And moving to Ryan Finley only made it worse, in my opinion. I felt like I understand the decision. They need to decide. Hey, are we going to be in the Joe Burrow and previously Tua? I can't say his last name.
Tagovailoa.
The Tua race.
Tagovailoa.
That guy. I don't know college football. I always see the name. I never even heard it. So I just now that race, it seems to be over. But I understand them wanting to test out the rookie. I just think it was still a mistake. I don't know. I felt like I with all the new brass, they really want to move on. I think that like the Bengals are really going to go through a change, and they needed this. They really did need an actual change. They needed to stop stagnating at 8-8. And going to 0-10 sucks, but it had to happen for them to possibly get better in the future. It looks like they're blowing everything up. I think they're going to not have many players on the roster in the next 2 years that are like the same as now. But I'm going off on a tangent. Back to their offense. It's just not good. It's just not going to be a coherent unit. I don't think it's going to start in this game against the Steelers defense. It seems to be mostly healthy coming into this game.
I mean, I don't really think that either of us, you don't really go into a season expecting many teams to be 0-10, but was 0-10 something that would have been that outlandish at the start of the year when we're talking, how are the Bengals going to do this year? I didn't think that they were going to be anywhere near as bad as they are now, but did you think differently? I can't remember if you had thought that way about them or not.
Surprisingly, I knew I thought their offensive line was going to be the worst in the league. I thought it was easily going to be, which they actually haven't been statistically. But regardless, I thought they could have got one win. And I thought they could have had 1 win, 2 wins. But I thought their offensive line was going to allow their offense to do nothing. And it's really stopped Joe Mixon, but it hasn't completely stopped their offense.
Yeah, it really started off on the wrong foot there when they lost Jonah Williams for the season, and they've got the Cordy Glenn injury. Even with him back, I'm not sure how well he's going to play. Billy Price didn't look that good last year. Bobby Hart is a turnstile. Their tight ends are decent, but they're not great. And without A.J. Green out there, they basically, I don't know. It's hard. I mean, this team just really doesn't have a lot to write home about on offense, and Ryan Finley's completing less than half of his passes. You go by and look at this week by week. I remember we were talking about how they looked good against the Seahawks in week 1, losing by just 1 point, but they've scored more than 20 points. How many times? Once this year? Yeah, they've scored more than 20 points just twice. Once in the opening week of the year against the Seahawks, they scored 20. And then they scored 23 in a loss to the Cardinals at Paul Brown Stadium. So, I mean, it's been terrible for them. They just can't get in the end zone. And look, like you said, I get why you'd want to see what you have in Ryan Finley, but I'm also, I think about the whole Dwayne Haskins and Kyler Murray situation. It's quite clear that Kyler Murray has more around him than Dwayne Haskins does, but the fact of the matter is, neither of them had a ton. It's just what can the quarterback bring to you? And Kyler Murray is more of a dynamic player than Dwayne Haskins is. And they were able to make that offense, they were able to sort of streamline it and make it more about Kyler Murray, while Dwayne Haskins is just kind of running a prototypical offense. There's nothing really suited to his strengths there. And when you've got a fourth-round pick and Ryan Finley coming in, I can't imagine that there was much done to basically adjust the offense for him, because they don't know if he's the guy or not, whereas they already know that Kyler Murray is the guy. Normally, if you're not going to commit that much to one guy, I don't like throwing guys into dumpster fires. I get it, but it's just, I think about Josh Rosen when I think about what Ryan Finley's had to go through the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good comparison, honestly, because Josh Rosen got thrown into like 2 dumpster fires. The Cardinals at the time did not build around Rosen. They built for basically the next year, and that ended up being for Murray, drafted all those wide receivers and stuff. And then, something I did want to say, the Bengals, do you think the Bengals have a win if they have A.J. Green? I think they win the first game against Seahawks, come out strong, and then they might lose like 8 more, and then they'll win another one somewhere.
I mean, you look at their close games so far, you think that Seahawks game, maybe he could have made a difference, maybe that Buffalo game or that Cardinals game. I don't think they would beat the Ravens, even with A.J. Green. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I have to think that he would have made some plays, but how many wins does one guy add to a team, even considering how bad the rest of the offense has been?
It's tough when you're out there with 10 other guys. How much of a difference is one really good player going to make? I still think they win that first game.
I think it's a lot more likely. Although one thing to point out is that they still threw the ball for like 400-plus yards in that game, and John Ross went off. If they don't win this week, they have games against the Browns twice, the Jets, Patriots, and Dolphins. Do you think they have a win in them?
Yeah, so I actually do think the Bengals have a good chance of getting a win. And with the Dolphins and Jets, I think those are their best chance. Funny enough, I feel like they're going to get a win against the Jets over the Dolphins. I think they're still going to lose to the Dolphins. The Dolphins have been playing better, in my opinion, as of late. But the Jets they're just terrible. They're just in a bad state. Everything about them is wrong, in my opinion. I just don't think that they're a good team. And despite the Bengals being 0-10, I think that the Bengals are actually maybe the better team. I won't be surprised if the Jets win. I'll put it that way. But I think that that's where the Bengals get their possibly only win of the season. I could also see them beating the Dolphins, but for right now, I think that they could beat the Jets. I don't see them beating Cleveland either time, even though they usually keep it close.
And we have already highlighted the reasons for the Bengals' 0-10 start on offense. But the defense is not blameless either, Austin. They're yielding 425 yards per game, almost 30 points per game on the defensive side. Terrible pass rush. You look at their defense, and you talked about how they're going to probably gut most of the roster, and it makes sense. But you look at the back end, they just lost one of their best defensive backs in Drake Kirkpatrick for the year, and they've got an injury to Sean Williams up front, and they just have nothing going on with the linebackers right now. It's pretty ugly, and even though Geno Atkins is still there, you look at the defensive front, it's really talent deprived, and there's not anything exciting about what you see on this defense besides maybe William Jackson and maybe Jesse Bates.
It's really a defense devoid of talent, and I think where they struggle most is their linebackers for sure. There's a reason why they're the worst rush defense in the league, and it's like almost historically bad. It's because those linebackers are just so bad. They let so many runs go down the middle and get up to the outside. They're not fast enough for that. It's just there's no real place where they succeed. And, I mean, part of it's going to be on the defensive linemen too, but I really think that, like, out of all the positions, their linebackers are worse. Because at least you could say, like, yeah, we have William Jackson and Jesse Bates in our secondary. Like, that's actually that's not bad. I honestly think you could probably find a worse secondary in the league. Off the top of my head, I probably can't. But I think the Dolphins are probably worse. Without Rashad Jones right now, no Bobby McKean, I think they're easily worse. So I'll take them. But regardless, it's just it's just really bad on the front seven for the most part, and it's kind of upsetting because Geno Atkins was a good player not too long ago, and I mean he's still a good player. Like don't take that as me saying that, but it's just not he's not playing at a high level. Carlos Dunlap, I felt like hasn't been as good as he was for about 2 seasons now. It's just been pretty rough. I like Carl Lawson. I like these guys, but like they've all just been injured and stuff. Like they lose all these guys to injuries and stuff. Like you said, they lost Drake Kirkpatrick to injured reserve, so their backup cornerbacks are going to be playing a lot in this game, and they don't really have that many cornerbacks left. Like it's just really rough. They've suffered a lot of injuries this year.
Yeah, and you kind of talked about the linebackers first. I mean, that's a group that we were pointing out last year as possibly the worst in the league, and I don't think it's any better. I mean, it
really hasn't improved. It's worse.
I mean, who was that guy? They had Preston Brown before, right? The old Bills linebacker. And I remember...
They cut him.
Yeah, we liked him, and then they cut him. And he might have been their best linebacker.
Apparently, he just wasn't playing that well, and I guess they decided to move on from him. They also cut Malik Jefferson, who I liked coming into last year's draft.
Yeah, so maybe the Steelers did right not to draft him, but regardless, there's problems there. And, Geno Atkins is still a solid player, but he's not in his prime anymore. And I like Carl Lawson as well, but there's nothing to write home about. And they're starting B.W. Webb regularly. I never was a big fan of Sean Williams. I mean, I like Jesse Bates and I like William Jackson, but they can't carry this defense, and the statistics will show that. Teams have been able to run the ball, like you said, so well. And when teams have thrown the ball, the Bengals have, a bottom third defense in terms of passing yards against, but it hasn't mattered because teams don't need to throw the ball against them. And when they do, the Bengals generate almost no pass rush. They're tied for last in the league with the Dolphins with sacks with just 13. And I guess we can start shifting focus to now the Steelers side of the ball. We'll talk about the Steelers defense in a second. But on the Steelers offense, we already touched on how much they've struggled, all the injuries, and just the lack of production. But there has to be some hope that the Steelers offense can get things going. I mean, something has to give here. The Steelers offense has really struggled, but the Bengals defense has been historically bad in the other direction. If there's a game for the Steelers offense to maybe break out, and maybe not like a 30-burger, but at the very least has an efficient game similar to what we saw in the second quarter on against the Dolphins, I feel like it has to be here because the Bengals just have no answers for anybody. And I don't care. I mean, pretty much the only thing you could say is, well, what if the Steelers have to play Johnny Holton every play? But, I mean, besides that, I even the Steelers' struggles on offense, I like the way this matchup goes for the Steelers.
I actually view it like almost not polar opposite, but the opposite. I find that the Bengals have a good matchup with the wide receivers in this game because Juju Smith-Schuster's out, and I think that with William Jackson, he's a pretty good shutdown corner. He's like underrated, I feel like, because he's on a really bad team right now, so no one really talks about him. But I feel like I can count whoever he's on to be shut down for the play. So that really leaves you with your choice of whichever one he's not on, Deontay Johnson or James Washington, as your maybe trustworthy wide receivers, if you could even say that about Washington yet. And I don't feel good about that. That doesn't make me feel good. Like shutting down Juju Smith-Schuster and leaving both Deontay Johnson and James Washington, I'm okay with. I can agree with that sentiment. It's just that you're making one step up, and I don't know if I'm willing to bet on one of these wide receivers stepping up, especially with how Mason Rudolph played last game. I'm just like I feel hit or miss. I feel like this might have worked out in the Bengals' advantage, how hurt the Steelers are, and I'm also banking on Benny Snell being able to rush all over them, or like Jalen Samuels sort of did in their first meeting. So I don't feel as good. I feel like the Bengals got lucky with the offense being so hurt in this game and how bad the offense already was before the injuries.
Well, then what about the tight ends then? Because William Jackson might be able to shut down a receiver, but those linebackers are by far the worst in football, and I don't really know how they could stop either of the Steelers' tight ends or running backs.
Yeah, but the tight ends really, I feel like, haven't really shown up in the past few weeks. Maybe this is their game. Maybe this is the game where Vanette and McDonald combine for 100 receiving yards. I don't know. I get a bad feeling because you're right. The tight end should have favorable matchups and typically will be on the linebackers. And like we already said, the linebackers are like the worst here. And even if they're not on linebackers, their safeties aren't that good besides Jesse Bates. And then their other corners behind William Jackson just aren't that good. So something does have to get. I just have a bad feeling. Bad feeling.
What about Mason Rudolph? How are you thinking he's going to bounce back after, A, his worst performance as a quarterback in the National Football League, and B, after everything that's gone on with him over the past week with the whole Myles Garrett incident? And we'll get into that later, but how do you think he's going to bounce back?
I think he's going to do okay in this game. I feel like he's going to come back to being how he has been, just kind of taking the dump offs, not really super flashy. He's going to go back to playing a clean game or not that many interceptions. Might get 1 or 2 touchdowns in this game. I think he's going to play okay. I think he's going to go back to how he was before the 4 interception catastrophe he had.
I think he's going to have one of his better games this week. I'm not saying like he's going to be like extra motivated to play better this week. I think it's just a matter of he's always shown, at least thus far, he's shown the ability to have that that moxie, that ability to bounce back in terms of he's not going to let the past bother him. If he plays poorly this week, it's not going to be because he played poorly last week. It's going to be because of stuff that happened this week that affected his performance. It's not anything to do with what happened in the past, at least I don't think. I think that this will be a more favorable matchup for him, and I don't necessarily mean he's going to throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, but I think we'll see a solid performance from him. I think it'll be cleaner. The key will obviously be not turning the ball over, but I think we're going to see a bounce-back game from Rudolph, and this is really a big test for Rudolph, and one thing I want to point out is that remember that it's going to be really easy to criticize Rudolph in this game because it's kind of a lose-lose for him. If he plays like crap, he plays like crap against the worst team in the league, but if he plays well, it doesn't matter too much because it came against one of the worst defenses in football. So I just want to see improvement from last week, and I want to see him start to put things together and see more of those, hopefully more of those wow moments or those, oh, I see why they drafted this guy. Because we've seen a few nice plays from him, but we talked about this last week or even earlier in the week. We haven't seen that enough to be like, oh, that's why the Steelers had a first-round grade on this guy. You know what I mean?
And we haven't seen enough of that yet. It's only been 7 games now, but we haven't seen that flash factor of like a first round pick.
And this would be the kind of game where you'd want to at least start seeing that. He's approaching half a season now. You'd hope that against a team like this is your first opportunity. You're seeing the team for the second time. Hopefully, this is where you start to see more of an improvement.
Yeah, we sure hope so.
Absolutely, because we all know the offense needs it. And then on the other side, we already talked about the Bengals defense, but from a matchup perspective, the Steelers are only going to be missing Artie Burns, who's a reserve defensive back. We already talked about the Bengals' holes on offense, which is basically everywhere. I love T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree on their respective matchups, even with Cordy Glenn coming back. Cam Hayward is going to commit some Ohio State crime against poor Billy Price. He has 8.5 sacks against the Bengals over the last few years. He's been a monster. I just don't see how the Bengals can establish a run game. And every level of the Steelers' defense, I just think, is going to be able to overwhelm the Bengals' offense. If the Bengals score, again, that magic number is 20 for me, just because the Bengals have only surpassed it twice, and once was against the Seahawks in Week 1. I don't see how the Bengals can score more than like 17 in this game.
It's going to be hard for them. It's going to be hard, especially going against the Steelers defense. Like, the Steelers defense really has only gotten better since their last meeting as well. So I feel like it's just going to be tough for the Bengals with how healthy the Steelers defense is. This is where they would have needed help. They needed the Steelers to be a little bit more injured here than just losing a reserve cornerback. So honestly, this should be pretty easy for the Steelers defense. I think the offensive line is still holding them way back. And go into it again. They're just all their positions they have aren't just they don't really have a clear advantage in this game, in my opinion. They don't have a place where it's like, oh wow, they could really exploit the Steelers defense here. It's just going to be hard for them to be able to put up, like you said, more than 20 points.
The only thing that would make me concerned would be Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon in space, but we know how hard it's going to be for Joe Mixon to get in space, and then if you're Keith Butler, you're looking at Tyler Boyd and you're saying, you're not going to beat us.
Exactly. I feel like it's just going to be tough for them to even get their good players going.
And, one thing I will say, the Steelers had a down week on defense last week against yes, it hasn't been great, but it's a talented offense on the road on a Thursday night. And, they didn't force any turnovers. They only had 1 sack, but they still gave up, I think, less than 300 yards of offense, and they kept the Steelers in that game for pretty much the entire time, and that was with a putrid offensive performance that included four interceptions. So even on a bad week, the Steelers defense did well enough for the team to win, and this is a far more inferior offense. So I feel good about the defense in this one. I think that you look at Ryan Finley, Austin, and all the problems we've talked about with Mason Rudolph, and yes, it's a much smaller sample size of only 2 games, but we talk about the indecisiveness, the not throwing deep as much. Ryan Finley's been even worse. I mean, his intended air yards is like 2 whole yards less than what Mason Rudolph's is.
Yeah, it's just going to be really rough for their offense. Like, we can't really say it enough. It's just the Bengals offense in this game is just really going to struggle. Like you said, Finley's been not doing so well in his few starts that he's had, so I don't think it's going to come out in this game.
One thing that Ryan Finley does do is he can move. So you're going to have to make sure that you can keep Ryan Finley in the pocket. And if he takes off, you obviously have to make sure that you can bring him down. Not that he's Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray or anything back there, but it is something to keep note of. And just a quick note, Randy Bullock is still their kicker. Kevin Huber is still their punter. Alex Erickson is their punt returner. He's been dangerous against the Steelers in the past. They've got this guy named Brandon Wilson who's been a pretty good kick returner this season. I'm double-checking his stats right now. Let me see here. As a kick returner this year, he has 490 yards and a 92-yard kick return touchdown. I think that was against the Ravens? I think it was. I forget. But he has a touchdown this year. So obviously the Steelers have struggled when it comes to their return units this year, their kickoff and punt units this year when it comes to stopping returns. It's been pretty bad. So, that's something to be concerned about. And as far as the return men go, do you think we see Cam Sutton back there for kick returns and punt returns? I mean, we're down to the nitty-gritty with the Steelers return men here. It's a mess.
Honestly, there's no reason teams shouldn't just kick short and just try and let the Steelers run and have them start at their 20 every single time that they have to return it. Because honestly, that's what I do. And honestly, if I'm the Steelers, I'm saying if that ball goes in the end zone, you take a knee. Don't even run it out. It doesn't even matter. Because the best they've gotten so far this year is a return of 26 yards. So you're telling me at their best they could get 1 more yard of starting position and risk players getting hurt. To me, give up. I don't even care. Belly up, you take a knee in the end zone if it comes there. Because I'd rather not risk getting depth players hurt for 1 more yard at the best. So at the most of the time, you're going to end up with the offense being in a worse position as well. So the special teams I've given up on for the year for returning. I think that any time that ball gets in the end zone, they need to knee it down. I don't care what they see.
I think that wraps up our preview of the Steelers and Bengals. Let's move on to Week 12 around the NFL. It started off with a bang on Thursday night. The Texans win 20-17 against the Indianapolis Colts. A controversial call there at the end, though. It looked like Deshaun Watson had fumbled, but they didn't even review the play, and it looked like Darius Leonard had come up with the ball. Did you get a chance to see that?
Did see the replay. I didn't watch it live, but I did see, and it just kind of sucks that they couldn't get it reviewed. I don't know if it would have been overturned if it would have been ruled a fumble, but I mean, it should have been reviewed in the first place to see.
I don't think it would have been either, but I think it's just the optics of it look really bad when you don't even take a look at it. I think that that's something that the league should have done, and that I just want to point out that's something that I think Sky Judge would have fixed.
100% Sky Judge would have sent that to a review. They would have seen that.
All right, let's start making our picks. We got the 1 o'clock games first. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in Atlanta taking on the Falcons. Both teams at 3-7. They're both basically out of the playoff hunt, but a loss here for a team definitely eliminates them from playoff contention. So the Falcons are getting 4.5 at home. We were talking about how the Falcons are playing a bunch of divisional games here in a row, 5 straight. And they get the Buccaneers for the first time, who are struggling lately, coming off 2 straight divisional wins, the Falcons are. Where are you leaning on this one?
I'm going to pick the Bucs plus 4.5. I think they bounce back here. I don't think Atlanta keeps up blowing out the rest of the division. I'm going to say that this is where Atlanta slows it down. I'm going to pick the Bucs plus 4.5. Who you got?
I got a feeling that you're right, but I'm behind you in the standings here, and I got to make up ground. So I'm going to go with the team that's been hot lately over the team that's been cold. So I'll take the Falcons minus 4.5 here. Denver Broncos at the Buffalo Bills. A matchup of a 3-7 Broncos team against the Bills, who are 7-3, looking to get to 8 wins. I don't think they've started 8-3 in my entire lifetime. So this could be a sneaky trap game for the Bills. They're only getting 4.5 despite having a huge huge advantage in terms of record here. Do you read into that at all?
I actually am subscribed to that. I'm picking upset alert. I am picking the Broncos plus the points with the idea that I think the Broncos are going to win. So what I think is the Broncos have been playing much better lately. The beginning of the year was terrible for their defense, and since then they've only gotten way better on defense. Now where the Bills were strong in the beginning was their defense, and now their defense is a hole in it, in my opinion. Their rush defense is really, really rough as of late, when they didn't really start that way. And their offense is sort of inept. So you're asking their offense to put up points against a really good defense, and then their defense seems to have like a hole in it where I think the Broncos could actually exploit. The Broncos have been playing decently the past couple of weeks with their new quarterback. So I'm picking the Broncos plus 4.5 with the idea that they actually win this one.
Yeah, the Broncos have actually looked relatively decent the last 6 weeks, besides that Thursday night game against the Chiefs a handful of weeks ago. I'm with you on this one. I'm kind of selling on the Bills here. I was high on them early on in the year, but of their 7 wins, 0 have come against winning teams. And yes, the Broncos aren't a winning team, I know that, but the Broncos have been more competitive lately. And even though the Bills looked impressive last week, I've got a funny feeling that the Bills are going to drop one of these games. Have you looked at the Bills' schedule here? There's a chance that they could lose the rest of their games.
Actually did not. So is it really tough I'm assuming they versus the Patriots. They got to versus the Steelers. I know they haven't played the Ravens yet.
So here's what they got. They obviously have the Broncos tomorrow. Then they're at Dallas for Thanksgiving next Thursday. So they've got a game in Dallas. So that's something to look out for. Then they're home against the Ravens, at Pittsburgh, at New England, and then they finish the year against the Jets. So that Jets game seems like the most winnable one, but the next 5 games are not easy at all.
Yeah, that's really tough for them besides that Jets game, like you said. I mean, I could picture them losing to the Ravens pretty bad. I think the Steelers at this point could beat them now. I think I said on the podcast last week I was scared for that game. My opinion has changed. I think that the Bills aren't as scary as I originally thought. It's just going to be, and Patriots I think are going to blow them out on that second time. I mean, I know they kept it close that first time, which made a lot of people believe in the Bills, but I think that the Patriots are going to blow them out on that second time for some reason. But yeah, it's going to be tough for them.
The New York Giants are at the Chicago Bears. Chicago's laying 6.5. Do we know what the status of Mitchell Trubisky is?
He's playing. He's good.
Okay.
He's starting too.
So, what does that mean to you?
It means I'm picking the Giants plus 6.5 because I don't believe in the Bears putting up any points. As long as Trubisky is a starter, I think that any other opposing team could keep it within like 5 points. It doesn't matter. You could pick the Bengals there, and I'm thinking I'm going to pick the Bengals plus 5, which is ridiculous. So for me, I'm going to pick the Giants plus 6.5. Anything over 5, I'm going to be picking against the Bears. Giants plus 6.5.
I'm right there with you. 6.5 is just too much, man. I know that Daniel Jones is turnover prone and the Giants have been bad, but Mitchell Trubisky's been just hard to watch, and that offense is another example of an offense that's completely talent deprived. It is that of the Chicago Bears. I think that this is going to be a close game, so I'll take the Giants plus the 6.5 as well. Let's move on to the Dolphins and Browns. Cleveland's getting 10.5 at home. I actually like the Dolphins. I'll go first here. I actually like the Dolphins to keep it within 11 here. Within 10 here. The Browns, I know that they're coming off that big win, and the Dolphins just got blown out against the Bills, but the Browns, I feel like they could start to backslide a bit here. They're now without their best defensive player, and it's been an absolute circus. Ryan Fitzpatrick will play, so give me the Dolphins to keep it close. So I'll take the Dolphins plus 10.5, but I'll have the Browns to win here.
Okay, I'll pick the Browns to cover here. I still just don't believe in the Dolphins enough, and even without Ogunjobi and Garrett for this game, I think the Browns would still cover. So I'm going to pick them to cover.
The Detroit Lions at 3-6-1, and Jeff Driscoll are at the Washington Redskins and Dwayne Haskins. The Redskins are 3.5-point underdogs at home. Avert your eyes from this game. Hello?
It's cut out super bad for that.
Okay.
And I have no idea. It cut out. It started. I honestly thought that the internet was dropping again, because it distorted your voice at the end, and then it was quiet. I was like, oh, okay.
Okay. You can still hear me though, right? You're still good?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Lions at the Redskins, Washington plus 3.5. The Redskins and Lions, it's a matchup between Dwayne Haskins and Jeff Driscoll. So avert your eyes, friend. Where are you leaning?
I'm going to pick the Lions to cover. I think that Lions with Jeff Driscoll are a better team than the Redskins still. Even with the Lions' defense not playing so well, I'm going to pick the Lions to cover.
I'm right there with you. I don't believe that the Redskins can score more than 14 points with Dwayne Haskins. It's been pretty bad. Even with the Lions' putrid defense, Jeff Driscoll's been playing better than Haskins has of late. The Raiders and the New York Jets getting together. The Jets are home, and they're only 2.5-point underdogs. I thought this line would be a little bit more than that, and I'm nervous. I really wanted to take the Jets if it was, a bigger line, but I'm still going to take the Jets just because I want to stick with what I got here, but I've banked on Sam Darnold and the Jets too often this year, and have been burned, so I'm not feeling great about it, but I'll take the Jets plus 2.5. I would not bet on this game at all.
I'm going to pick the Raiders to cover, but I am rooting for the Jets so that the Raiders lose the 6th seed again. So let's go Jets, but I think the Raiders cover that. I also agree. I thought that line was a little bit too low.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. With the Colts losing, all the Steelers have to do is win, and they'll be in possession of the number 7 spot in the AFC, which means just the Raiders are in front of the Steelers for a playoff spot. So you're really hoping that the Jets can knock off the Raiders here. That would be huge for the Steelers. The Carolina Panthers are in New Orleans playing against the New Orleans Saints. The Saints are 8-2. The Panthers are just 5-5 and are backsliding after looking good for a handful of weeks there under Kyle Allen. He has struggled, and now the Saints are getting 9.5 at home. You think this is going to be another blowout?
No, I think that this division typically keeps it close, so I'm going to pick the Panthers plus 9.5. I know Kyle Allen has been playing that well over the past few weeks, but I'm still going to pick Panthers plus 9.5 because both teams got blown out by the same Falcons team. So I think that somehow through some math and deduction, I'm going to pick that these teams keep it close. So Panthers plus 9.5 with the idea that the Saints win, but I think the Panthers keep it within 9.5.
I really wish that I wasn't trailing so much because I wouldn't have to make these picks that are different from yours, but I'm going to go with the Saints in this one. I do believe it's going to be close, but I need to try to make up some ground here, so I need the Saints to win big in this one. So I'll take the Saints to cover, lay that 9.5 points. And on to the final 1 o'clock game, the Seattle Seahawks at the Philadelphia Eagles. For some reason, the Eagles are favored by 1.5 despite the Seahawks being a team that I know they're on the road, but they're coming off a bye. I'm not too sure what that's all about. I'll take the Seahawks all day long.
Do you want to make it interesting since you are behind and I'll give you a chance to catch up. You want to make this line Seattle by 5? So Philadelphia plus 5?
Make it 5.5.
Yeah, we'll make it 5.5.
Okay.
We'll make our custom line for this because this line was ridiculous in my opinion. At least it gives you a chance to change it if you will. I'll just say I'm going to still pick the Seahawks to cover here, 5.5 points. Right. The Eagles are just not a good enough team in my opinion. Their secondary is bad. Tyler Lockett's playing. Lane Johnson's out. The only thing they got going for them is Javian Clowney might be out, which it's not even a sure thing yet. So I'm picking the Seahawks to cover a 5.5 point spread. Do you stick with your pick, or are you going to change it?
No, I'll change it to try to make up ground. So I'll take the Eagles plus our custom 5.5 point line. All right. Into our 4 o'clock games, the Jacksonville Jaguars, there's only 2. The Jacksonville Jaguars at 4-6, taking on the Tennessee Titans at 5-5. The Titans are minus 3.5. The Jaguars are still lingering, but they need this game to still be in the discussion. The Titans, they could afford a loss here, but chasing the Texans and Titans, they could really use a win here. So this is a very important game in the AFC South. I'm going to take the Titans here. I'm not crazy and impressed with what I saw from the Nick Foles-led offense last week. I think the Jaguars are going to start to fade here, and I think the Titans are just that scrappy team that's going to stick around just like they did last year, finishing at 9-7. I think they'll come away with a 7-point victory here.
I'm going to pick the Jaguars plus 3.5. I mean, I think that this game is going to be like a 23-20 game. I don't know which team I'm picking for 23-20, but it don't matter. As long as that's like the score, I would be right regardless. So Jaguars plus 3.5 for me.
Cowboys and Patriots is the main attraction for the late games. It's in Foxborough. The Patriots are getting 6.5 according to ESPN's Pigskin Pick'em. The Cowboys' offense has been fantastic, but they haven't seen a Patriots defense yet. And even though the Patriots' offense has struggled, so has the Cowboys' defense. It's low-key not been that good. So I'm going to take the Patriots to win by a touchdown. I'm not super confident in it, but the Patriots at home, I like that. So give me the Patriots, lay the points.
I agree. I'm picking the Patriots to cover here. I just think that they're the way better team. I think the Cowboys are going to be disappointing. And they're without Leighton Vander Esch, which only makes them worse for me. So I'm going to pick the Patriots to cover.
Green Bay Packers at the San Francisco 49ers. The Packers coming off the bye. This is an important game. This was flexed to Sunday night. And the Niners looking to run their record to 10-1, I think for the first time since 1990. And it's an important game between two NFC powerhouses. Conventional wisdom says take the Packers because they're coming off the bye and the Niners haven't looked great lately, but I'm going to take the Niners to win this one, and I think they win it by a touchdown. I think Jimmy G has the ball in his hands late in the game and makes enough big plays for the Niners to win and run their record to 10-1.
I'm going to pick the Packers plus 3.5 for this one. I think that my problem when thinking of this game is I first had the 49ers, but then I thought about it is I trust the Packers defense and I trust the 49ers defense. But what I trust more is the Packers offense than the 49ers offense. I just don't trust it. The Packers defense has actually been solid this year, having the Smith brothers as pass rushers, and they've really done a good job with their defense this year, in my opinion. And they got Devontae Adams playing still and all that. So I'm going to pick the Packers plus 3.5 with the idea that I think that they could possibly win this one. I have a good feeling the Packers win this, give the 49ers their second loss.
All right, and then the final game of the week, Monday Night Football. It's the Baltimore Ravens at the Los Angeles Rams. The Ravens are 3.5-point favorites on the road. What do you think about this one?
Personally, I think that the Ravens are going to cover handily. The Rams have shown me nothing over the past 3 weeks. It's just I think that the Ravens might blow this game out like the same as they did the Texans, like 40-7, something ridiculous. What do you think?
Yeah, the Ravens are playing. They're playing with the hot hand right now, and the Rams have been as cold as can be on offense this year, and I just haven't seen enough continuity from them like I have seen from the Ravens. Maybe it'll be a slow start for the Ravens, but I just don't see how they don't put up, how they don't get theirs, and I struggle to see how the Rams are going to put up a ton of points. So I'll take the Ravens to win by at least a touchdown, probably closer to 2. So, I'll take the Ravens, lay the 3.5 points. All right, let's move on to Steelers news and notes. So Devin Bush has not been playing as much lately as he had been originally at the beginning of the season. Obviously, part of that was due to injury, but part of that is because the Steelers are getting more snaps for Mark Barron, and that includes less snaps for Vince Williams as well. But Keith Butler on the matter is that we wanted to try to get Mark Barron on the field in coverage. And, if you've seen the meme where that guy is kind of looking at he tilts his head and looks at the camera, and there's a bunch of question marks that pop up around him, that's me right now. Why? Why would you want Mark Barron on the field in coverage? What has he shown you? What has he shown us that makes us think that's a good idea?
I have no idea, dude. I didn't see that until you wrote it down on here, and it just made me laugh. It's just, I don't know what the reasoning for wanting Mark Barron on the field. PFF has him graded as one of the worst linebackers in the league this year in both coverage and tackling. And take that as you will. I usually don't really listen to PFF, but it's just you see it. PFF grades it. It's just like you shouldn't really want to put Mark Barron on the field when you got Vince Williams and Devin Bush waiting. Like, I get it if you're running a 3 inside linebacker set because you have injuries or you just want to bring out that package. Like, yeah, you can put him on the field. He's a nice depth piece, but you don't really want to get him on the field more than he has to. I don't know. It's not really smart.
I think him being on the field is taken away from Vince Williams, too, and I don't like that because I think Vince Williams and Devin Bush is your best combo there.
That's your 1-2 punch. Should be your go-to. I don't know. I don't agree with the decision to put Barron on the field more.
I think it is a mistake as well. Another thing we have both thought was a mistake is not bringing back Eli Rogers, and that option is now by the wayside because he was drafted by the DC Defenders in the XFL supplemental draft. So good for him, but not good for us.
That just kind of stinks. I mean, I guess that's why the Steelers didn't bring him back in. I guess he was like, well, I mean, there's no way. If it ever was the option, he would have picked the Steelers. Just, I don't know what Eli Rogers did to the Roonies or whatever, but it's just ridiculous that he couldn't come back in and stuff because it seemed like he was the best option. Like, no offense to Deion King, I'm sure he'll play decently once he gets a few weeks with the Steelers, or maybe even he'll play decently this week. But it just made so much more sense to bring in Eli Rogers. Eli Rogers had flashed some good stuff. I understand that there's a reason no other teams have signed him when he's had visits with the Dolphins and the Texans and the Chiefs and the Raiders in the past. But it's just I don't know, man. I feel like Rogers should have been the guy because at least he has experience with you. He has playing time, some meaningful snaps, which Kane doesn't. I don't know. To me, Rogers should have been brought back, and I still think so. I think that, now it's kind of too late, but it's just over Johnny. If Deion Kane and Johnny Holton are the same kind of player, you should be cutting Johnny Holton and bringing back Eli Rogers. It's just in my head, but obviously now he's been drafted, it's probably not going to happen. I don't know how the XFL contracts work, if you could ever come to the NFL or not, but
you can't. That's why the Steelers didn't sign Landry Jones. So once you're there, you can't go.
That sucks. Yeah, that sucks. But it is what it is, I guess.
Steelers fan favorite Tuzar Skipper has returned to Austin. The Steelers signed him off of the Giants practice squad and have released Jayrone Elliott. And by the way, they also only have 5 defensive linemen on the roster right now after L.T. Walton went on injured reserve. So Skipper's back. Time to celebrate, man.
Yeah, man, it's kind of exciting. I mean, not as exciting as it should have been, but it kind of didn't really make sense, if I'm being honest. And signing 3 players off teams' practice squads in in a 1 week span kind of crazy for the Steelers. I don't know if that's ever happened for them in the time that I've been alive. I mean, I'm sure there is. It's just 1 week span signing 3 players off practice squads. That, like, never happens to them. It kind of freaks me out a bit because you're committed to all 3 of these players for 3 weeks now. Not that I want to cut Tazar Skipper, but you can't, like, open up a roster spot anymore. Like, or at least not with these 3 players. So that kind of worries me, but I'm glad he's back. Should provide some good depth, and I'm glad that he gets to stay with the Steelers for now.
I'm curious as to why they decided now to go with Skipper in favor of Jayrone Elliott after going with Elliott a few weeks ago and not placing a waiver claim on Skipper. I'm just kind of confused as to, like, what happened. Like, what changed?
Thinking Elliott's out injured for at least a few weeks because he got hurt.
Oh, is that what happened?
And then he was hurt. I don't know how serious it was, but they cut him after the injury. So I'm thinking that maybe he was expected to be out like 2 to 4 weeks, and the Steelers are like, well, we can't really afford that, so we'll just bring in Tazar Skipper, and we'll know he'll be decent enough. So it was better than holding on. That's what I think, anyway.
That certainly would give it some credence. So I guess we'll see, but I wouldn't be shocked if there are more roster moves made over the coming weeks too.
I just think it's tough, though. Like, where do you cut now? Like, the one guy I look at is Johnny Holton. Like, you could totally get rid of Johnny Holton, and that doesn't matter. But who else could you cut after that? It's just kind of like you're stuck with White for 3 weeks. You're stuck with Kane for 3 weeks. You're stuck with Tazar Skipper for 3 weeks.
You know what I would say. They're not going to do it, but you know who I would cut, right? Paxton Lynch.
Who?
Paxton Lynch.
Oh, yeah.
They
I honestly
won't.
forgot Paxton Lynch existed. I'm out here still thinking that we have 2 quarterbacks on the roster, and it's just Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges. I just completely forgot of Lynch's existence. That makes sense as well. Lynch and Holton are candidates if you really had to make a move.
Indeed, and Robert Spillane is on the roster, so you could possibly cut him as well.
Me too.
So, okay. So you ready to get to the big stuff, the heavy-hitting stuff?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, first things first, Myles Garrett's suspension was upheld after his appeal, so was Larry Ogunjobi's. That was indefinite and a 1-game suspension, respectively. Marquise Pouncey's was reduced from 3 to 2 games, so just quick thoughts on all of that.
So I think that there was good moves all around. Kind of surprised Pouncey's was reduced, but I am happy about it. I think that having him is a big deal. And I knew he was, at the very least, I knew he was never playing for that Browns game. There was no chance in hell that the league was going to let him come back for that Browns game. But I am happy that he gets to come back after that. So that's cool. Ogunjobi, I think he got the right call. He should be suspended, but they did drop the additional fine. I think that's the right move, to drop the fine, just keep him suspended 1 game. I did like that. And then with Myles Garrett, he couldn't come back this year. I think that ship has sailed. So I think that overall I liked all the moves that they made.
Yeah, I really do think the NFL got it completely right so far, and I want to applaud them for that. Ogunjobi's still losing money because of the suspension, so the additional fine really doesn't make sense for him. And the Garrett suspension was upheld. That makes sense. And I thought Pouncey's being reduced made sense. I thought 3 games was a little excessive, just because you consider that the longest suspension before the Vontaze Burfict suspension this year was 5 games. So 3 games seemed a little excessive for that. Not that he should not have been suspended. He should have been, and he was. So I think 2 games is the perfect amount there. All right, and then the big news, obviously, is that coming out after the appeals process with Myles Garrett, really during the appeal, Garrett had alleged that Mason Rudolph directed a racial slur at him during last week's incident, which caused him to snap. So this came out publicly after the ruling of the suspension was upheld, and Garrett did not think that this was going to become public information, but it did. And Rudolph, through his lawyer, denied the accusation. The NFL then investigated and found no evidence to support Garrett's allegation that Rudolph called him a racial slur at that time. There are multiple cameras used. There's audio. People are mic'd up. There's other people there. The officials were standing right by there, or one of the officials was standing right by there. No one has said anything to suggest that Rudolph did say that. In fact, according to Tom Withers of the Associated Press, no Browns players had mentioned anything about this being a possibility up to that point. And Steelers linemen's, both of Steelers linemen, Cameron Hayward and Ramon Foster, have been quoted as saying that Mason Rudolph did not use a racial slur. So this is a slippery slope because we technically don't know exactly what happened, and we technically never will, most likely. But the lack of evidence supporting Garrett's claims here, plus the fact that it took him nearly a week to bring this accusation to light, when you consider that if Rudolph saying that is what made Garrett snap, then how is it that he didn't mention anything about this, not just that night, but in any of the several nights since then before the appeal? It just, I don't know. It gives it the appearance that he's just trying to do anything to get his suspension shortened. And even though we'll never know exactly what happened, it really stains and tarnishes Mason Rudolph's character. Even, yes, he possibly could have done it, but what if he didn't, and now he's been tarnished, his character has been tarnished unfairly, and that's something that he's probably going to carry with him throughout the rest of his career and maybe for the rest of his life, because that's the way the world works nowadays, is you see one headline and all of a sudden that's all that matters. Anything else that could be done to correct that, or a second headline, ironing out some details of the first report, it doesn't matter. And people will have made up their mind already. So it really is just an all-round unfortunate situation.
Yeah, just waiting a week to say that is not out of character. And the biggest thing for me was Sheldon Richardson, who said that Myles Garrett basically said that Myles Garrett wasn't super in the wrong, and that basically Mason Rudolph deserved it. That is not exactly what Sheldon Richardson said, but he said that Mason Rudolph started it, and that's why it escalated, and that Myles Garrett's suspension should be shortened. He said that he heard that Garrett didn't tell him that there was a racial slur used, and that also he didn't hear one. And that, to me, was the biggest deal breaker for me. If the guy that was defending you in the first place said that didn't happen, that Garrett didn't say anything about that, and he didn't hear it, I think that's basically all you need. Baker Mayfield also did, but that to me doesn't mean anything because he's on offense and should have been on the sideline, so he wouldn't have heard it. But also Kareem Hunt basically failed to say anything. He's like, listen, I'm keeping everything between me and Garrett a secret. And then Freddie Kitchen said some dumb stuff today, saying I forget what he said. He basically said, if Myles Garrett said something, I believe it. And it's just like, oh, okay, all right. But he's like, but you have to. That's between Myles Garrett and you guys or something like that. He said something stupid like that. But anyway, it is just a shame that it's just reaching for strings. In my opinion. I mean, again, it could have happened. I really seriously doubt it. That's a serious topic that I feel like even if the Steelers his teammates were defending him for the Garrett thing, it's not something you defend a guy over. That has something to do with your entire identity. It's just and the Steelers defending him would be people offended by that. You know what I'm saying? It's just, to me, I think that it's just baseless and just tarnishing a guy's character just because you're grabbing at strings so you made a mistake. You got to learn from your mistakes. You can't just keep making excuses.
Like Cam Hayward said, why can't we all just accept the punishments and move on?
Man, I think that's the best way to go about it.
Indeed. And hopefully we have started to move in that direction, as ugly as this has gotten. So 33 players in total have been fined for their actions. So they fined both the Steelers and Browns $250,000 each. And then they gave a bunch of different players from both sides the minimum of $3,507 in fines for being on the field and leaving the bench when this happened. And there's a whole list of players. You can find it on ESPN and probably NFL.com. But the guys who got more than that amount are Mason Rudolph with $50,000. I suspect that's going to be reduced via appeal because there's a certain clause where you can only be fined X percentage of your weekly paycheck, and for Rudolph that's a lot more than the allotted percentage. I forget exactly what it is, so I would imagine that's going to get reduced. Marquise Pouncey has a $35,000 fine. We already talked about Ogunjobi's. His was reduced, and Myles Garrett is getting a $45,000 fine on top of his suspension as well. So, man, oh man, what a mess.
It really is. I mostly, out of all the suspensions, I kind of felt bad for Tony Brooks James. He just kind of came out in the field, got slapped with a $30,507 suspension, and then he got laid off like the next day. So that kind of sucks for him. But
I have a feeling the team will reimburse him.
Yeah, that'd be nice of them. I hope they do.
Yeah, because, I mean, those guys aren't exactly, I mean, they're football players, but they're not exactly making big money when you're bouncing between practice squads and whatnot. So,
yeah, man.
Okay. Also wanted to point out that center Patrick Morris was called up from the practice squad to take the place of B.J. Finney, who's now starting, and there was no one that needed to be dropped because Pouncey was placed on the reserve suspended list. So, good for Patrick Morris. This is his first time ever being on an active roster, but hopefully we don't have to see him at all.
Yeah, I hope not. That would be a red button scenario or emergency. Something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong.
And last but not least, just one NFL thing to talk about. The Jets signed their tight end Ryan Griffin to a 3-year extension worth up to $10.8 million. He's emerged as the Jets' top tight end this season, with Chris Herndon out due to various injuries and a suspension this season. You like the move?
Honestly, I don't really know if I'm being honest. I felt like Ryan Griffin's only been okay, but I guess we'll see. I mean, he didn't get like a super rich contract. I guess it's a pretty good move for them.
It's up to 10.8, so it's probably going to most likely be less than that. And I mean, hey,
that's not bad.
He's making less than Nick Boyle.
Man.
So, okay. Let's wrap this one up. X Factors and bold predictions. So I'm asking you a question this week, and I told you already, this is a very hard one, so I apologize already, but I think it's kind of cool because it's kind of an obscure statistic, but it's a Steelers-Bengals one. So, the last time the Steelers lost to the Bengals in Paul Brown Stadium, that's where the game is going to be played this week, the Bengals won 20-10. The Steelers scored one touchdown. What is the name of the wide receiver that caught a touchdown pass in that game? The wide receiver has 2 career catches and is from Penn State. He wore the number 14. Do you know who this player is?
Oh God.
You would get like a ton of gold stars if you can get this one.
I gotta at least make a guess. I think so. This is a while ago, right?
Yes, this is 2013 week 2.
Oh, this isn't that far. 2013 week 2. Is this?
Remember, this player has had 2 career catches in his entire career. One of them was this touchdown.
Is this DeMarcus Ayers?
Nope. DeMarcus Ayers was a rookie in 2016.
Oh damn! I'm thinking that he was farther back. That'll be it. I'm not gonna get it on another guess. It's gonna piss me off though.
All right. His name is Derek Moy.
I don't think I ever would have gotten that, like, basically ever.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like I said, it was very hard. I just posted a link on our outline. Check it out. Nice little fade route. Do you remember Justin Brown?
Do you remember Justin Brown?
Justin Brown was his college teammate. They both went to Penn State. I think they came out the same year or 1 year apart. Moy ended up dressing in this game, caught a touchdown pass from Roethlisberger, and he only caught one other pass for, I think, like 16 yards in his entire career. So, just kind of interesting. I remembered thinking about that game because I was like, oh, what's something significant about the last time the Steelers lost to the Bengals at home? And, Derek Moy, because I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, I remembered some, for lack of a better term, some no-name receiver caught our touchdown in that game. And sure enough, that was Derek Moy.
Hey, man. Damn, you're coming at me with the heat. Coming at me with that hard stuff.
Yeah, so not exactly fair, but that'll set you up for an even more difficult trivia question next week. So I guess that's only fair after something like that. But something obscure that I thought would be kind of cool to talk about. So, okay, with that being the case, I'll go first with my X Factor, and where do I want to go? I'll go with Benny Snell. Why not? The Steelers' ground game has been atrocious this year. Besides the Dolphins game and part of the Chargers game, we talked about the struggles with guys like Trey Edmonds, Tony Brooks, James, Jalen Samuels. They're just not doing a good job of running the football. And Benny Snell had a good showing against the Chargers, but with the struggles of the offense and the running game, not being able to get much going in the passing game, partially because of that, this is a huge game for Benny Snell. He's probably going to be leaned on a lot to run the ball and pass protect and be an occasional receiver. I think his performance tomorrow could go a long way to how the Steelers do in terms of putting up points in this one. So give me Benny Snell as my X factor on offense. And for bold prediction, I think he has a 100-yard rushing game, and he scores not one, but 2 touchdowns. So give me Benny Snell with 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So that's my offensive X factor. Give me both of your X factors in this one, Austin.
I'm going to start with defense just because I can. I'm going to pick Cameron Hayward. I feel like he has a pretty solid matchup in this game, and like you said, he's done really well against the Bengals in the past, having like 8 sacks and not that many pass games against the Bengals. So I'm going to pick him, and my bold prediction for him is going to get 2.5 sacks in this game, and an additional tackle for a loss with those 2.5 sacks. And then for offense, I'm going to pick James Washington. I feel like he's going to be the guy to step up in this game. I feel like Johnson's going to be the one that's mostly taken away. So I think that Washington's going to be the one to step up, and he's been significantly improving over the past couple of weeks. He set a regular season record 2 weeks ago, and then he broke it for receiving yards the next week. And now I think that he's going to have another good game. And I think from bold prediction-wise, I think he's going to go over 100 yards receiving for the first time in his career. And additionally, he'll get 1 touchdown with that. So that's my bold prediction. What's your last X factor?
My defensive X factor is going to be Steven Nelson. So Nelson has 4 career interceptions, and they all came last year. But Nelson's played very well this year. And other than the one deep pass he gave up early to Odell Beckham Jr., he largely shut him down. So with the Bengals' only true option being Tyler Boyd, I think that Nelson's going to be tasked with taking him away most of the time. And I think he'll respond well to that, and he'll come up with his first 2 interceptions as a member of the Steelers, and he'll take one of those back for a touchdown. So that's my defensive X factor and bold prediction. So, all in all, you got the 0-10 Bengals hosting the 5-5 Steelers. This is about as close to a must-win game as it could be. The Steelers aren't out of it if they lose, but I mean, if the Steelers lose this game, how can you see them possibly winning any other games?
Be tough from here. I think that if the Steelers lose this game, you can basically rule them out from being able to get even a wild card slot. It's pretty rough. It's hard sledding from there. I mean, there are some really easy games going forward. You get the Jets, you get the Browns again, which I don't even know if you could call the Browns easy since you just lost them by 2 touchdowns. Yeah, the Ravens again, which is tough. Bills, which is a little bit easier. Cardinals, which are scary to me, but I mean, their defense isn't that good still. Just looking forward, there are winnable games, so I can't rule the Steelers completely out, but it's just really, really tough sledding if you lose this game. That being said, I think the Steelers win 20-13 here and cover. I think the offense is going to really struggle against one of the worst defenses, even though it is like a really terrible defense, but I think they still are able to cover and win by a touchdown. So Steelers win 20-13. What do you got?
I don't see how the Bengals score more than 2 touchdowns in this game. The Steelers' defense is borderline elite, and the Bengals' offense is absolutely putrid, the worst in the league. And on the other side of the ball, I know the Steelers' offense has not been great, and they're missing some pieces, but I don't see how they're not going to be able to run the ball successfully, even with all their struggles. I think they'll be able to surpass 100 rushing yards in this game. And I think Mason Rudolph's going to bounce back in a pretty good way here. I think he'll be pretty efficient. He'll have one of his better games of the season, and I think a defensive touchdown makes this a blowout. I think this could be the start of something good for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and A division win is never easy, but I think that this will be a coming together moment for the team where they start to rally after the tough loss last week and the adversity that they faced with the whole Myles Garrett situation. So I think this will be a big win for the Steelers. So I'll take them to win 31-10 and thus covering a 6.5-point spread. So, any further thoughts on this game before we wrap this one up?
That should be good.
Alrighty then. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening today on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have any questions about the show, please feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com and check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. You can check out our episodes, which are posted on SoundCloud and YouTube. Thank you so much again, and Austin, you have a terrific night and enjoy the game tomorrow.
Sir, you too. Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.